Welcome to Inflection Points, a podcast about technology and big ideas from the Office of the CTO at Extreme Networks.
Carla, we've never met.
Yeah, I know that sounds strange, but it's true. We have never met in real life or IRL.
Well, I'm so excited to talk about this because we've formed quite a good relationship, I like to think, but maybe maybe this is a bad idea, a bad time to find out how you feel about that. But I think we have a great working relationship. There's a give and take, and we formed a little culture of two, I like to think. But in the office of the CTO, where we're, focused on looking to the future and finding new ways for technology to address, societal issues, we need to find ways to be able to support the idea of a culture that goes beyond a culture of two and goes beyond a culture of maybe 10 and maybe into thousands.
Yeah, I agree. So, yes, I think that we do have a good working relationship, Tim. I enjoy it.
I feel better about that. Thank you.
There you go. It's a win. But I think you are totally right. We have created a culture of two, but that's relatively easy to do one-to-one over Zoom. And you can potentially, there are many of our members of the Office of the CTO that, to your point, I have not met in person. You haven't met in person. And we can create a culture of even 10 and figure out ways to innovate because we're all, generally from the same background and we're meeting with each other. But the real question is, how do you scale that so that you have a culture that reaches out to 6,000 and they've got different team cultures that interface, and then you have different cultural backgrounds and differences and different ways of thinking of things. How do you build that company culture when you're not face to face? Because let's face it, a lot of companies have relied on bricks and mortar to build that culture. It's being around, you're at the Facebook campus, you're at the Google campus, or you're at Extreme, and you've got the colors all around you. You create an environment that allows people to have that kind of, unified experience. How do you do that in the infinite enterprise? As we've been, discussing the infinite enterprise, this idea of the pandemic is dispersing everything, and then technology is going to allow us to have more individualized experiences. How do you create a consistent company culture experience when everybody is dispersed and everybody can have their own individual at-home office?
Yeah, I feel a little bit like a poster boy for that at Extreme, because I joined after the start of the pandemic and after the first lockdowns in my region. So I've not met any of my coworkers. I've not been to the office. I don't have an office space other than what I have at home. Right. So I have to have this experience every day of trying to form these relationships and to become a part of a culture, or to be included into a culture that is in some sense foreign to me, because there are people who have been at this company for a long, long time, and they've been in offices and they've met with other people and they have that experience of a face-to-face relationship. So, do I find I have all the answers for how to form those relationships and that culture? Not at all.
No. And I think everybody is really grappling with that, because it's not only how do you build the culture, but then how does that change the meaning of diversity? How does that change the meaning of inclusion? These are all big questions that every company is grappling with. And everybody, if you read in the media, everybody's going, we want to go back. No, we don't. We want to go back. No, we don't. So everybody is trying to struggle through this. And if, we're in a hybrid scenario, how do you keep that consistency amongst your employees? And thank goodness there are two ladies who are going to join us today to help us think about how they're planning for the future.
Yeah. And I'm glad that we're going to have some help, because as we struggle, it's their job to try and figure it out. So first we have Tamika Jean-Baptiste, who is the Executive Director of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at Amgen.
Yeah, which is, talk about being at the forefront of having to struggle through this. Healthcare has been massively disrupted because of the pandemic. They have to have people on site in labs, and they still have a massive remote workforce. And then we also have our own home team, Kimberley Basnight, who is our VP of Talent, head of Diversity and Inclusion here at Extreme Networks. She's going to join us as well, because obviously, being a technology company, we're grappling with a lot of the same issues that Amgen is as well. You know, we have to test things in person, but we're all distributed globally, and we have to create this company culture for Extreme while we're all, remote and haven't met each other.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad that we've formed that relationship through the infinite enterprise. But how is that going to work for an entire company or for entire organizations throughout the world?
We are all wondering, what is the future of work? But you, Kimberley and Tamika, you both are the experts. You're facing this day to day. So, Kimberley, first, why don't you give us your thoughts on how this is going to change? And then Tamika, we'd love to hear from you about what are your companies currently thinking about? How is this going to change the workplace when we all, come back after the pandemic? Or maybe we don't.
Yeah, great question, Carla. So let me just say, there was a future of work prior to COVID. And so COVID really disrupted things for us. And when we think about, 10 years from now and who will be in the workforce, we recognize that it's going to be millennials and Gen Zs in the workforce. And so with that being the case, I think we not only have to think about who's in the workplace, but what is it going to look like, the future of work? What is that environment going to look like? Here's what we're doing. We're thinking of things as a hybrid. No longer will we have this, you work from home and you work in the office, but we really have a blend of a hybrid where I may be in the office a couple of days a week for collaboration, and then I may be working from home, which I'm super productive from home. So to answer that question, I think we all have to think in terms of a hybrid working environment for the next 10 years or so.
That's really fascinating. I think that's also, what we're seeing out in the news media. Everybody seems to be kind of going back and forth. Tamika, is that something that you're also seeing currently at Amgen? Is that what it's looking like it's going to be?
Yeah, I would agree that this moment has really been a moment of disruption, right, for us all. And we're really thinking, a lot of in line with what Kimberley mentioned, but really thinking about workplace as a tool. Right. So really not even defining that. I think, I think companies and corporations were heading down a path of, all right, 2 to 3 days, or you're at home, or I think we're really tapping into the needs of staff. And what do you use the workplace for, right? So it's really requiring us to really tap into our staff community and understand those needs, also recognizing the needs of the workforce of the future, and really making workplace a tool like everything else, and to leverage that when you need it, right? So I just think this mind shift and paradigm shift of how we're thinking about the workplace is at play right now and still evolving. I would like to say we all have a crystal ball and know how all this is gonna land, but the reality is we're still learning and evolving as we get more information about what the needs of our staff are.
So Tamika, take me through that change a little bit. Mm-hmm. So in the before times, if you will, most of companies had a mandate for people to be in the office, and I think that there was some tradition behind that rather than any need to be there. The pandemic has certainly influenced that shift, but how are companies addressing that mind shift? Because it's pretty difficult to take a culture that is very much ingrained, turn it on its head, and then know what to do. So how has that shift been perceived from the corporate side versus the user side?
I think it's nothing drives the need to understand it like what we went through with the global pandemic, right? We were forced to understand on both sides of the fence of how do we evolve, and think about healthcare, right? We have manufacturing facilities. Patients don't get what they need if someone is not there doing the research, creating the medication, and to even look at that model where you kind of need to be where the facility is. There's not a lot of luxury or wiggle room there. We've even thought differently about how to optimize that environment and create more flexibility and new technologies to kind of enhance the process, right? I think we need to recognize and can't ignore the needs of our staff and what, it can't look traditional and normal, right? Because you got, kids out of school, you can't work a 12-hour shift. Like, that's just not a reality. So how do we optimize that space for staff? So we had to understand that side of the fence. And there is a constant need to learn. I can't tell you how many surveys, COVID surveys, parenting surveys that we've implemented. And along the way, we are uncovering, wow, I didn't think of that, right? So I just think it's requiring us as organizations to listen more and take more of a human-centric approach to our decision making, because if we don't, it's going to have enterprise impact, right, in terms of results. So we're forced to figure this out in this moment and evolve as companies will need to in this time. So.
Right. Yeah. And Kimberly, I saw you nodding your head and talking about the surveys. Do you want to follow up on that?
Said, but let me also say, the thing that I was thinking as Tamika was sharing is stay tuned. Stay tuned. No one has figured this thing out. We're all still very much evolving. And the note I took as Tamika was sharing is, I believe in some cases disruption is necessary. And so maybe this was a necessary disruption to really bring us to the next level of innovation. We're in a tech environment. Tamika's in a pharmaceutical environment. I would suspect that the world for us is slightly different. We're accustomed to having to have, this hybrid or work from home type of environment. Mm-hmm. Maybe some industries are not, but I think we all need it to evolve in order to survive. And so, not to take you too far off the path, Tim, but I believe that stay tuned is really where we need to get to, where we're not making concrete decisions. We're really being very fluid. I think emotional safety is important with our employees, and that we have to keep them in the communication chain. They need to know what we're doing. Mm-hmm. It's not okay to just have these long periods of silence where there's nothing. And so we keep our employees involved and ask them, as Tamika shared, what do you think about this? What should we be doing next? Get that involvement, but stay tuned and don't get don't start to make concrete decisions yet, because I still think we're all figuring this thing out.
I think that's a really important point, that feedback loop with employees. If with HR, suddenly that revolution happens a lot faster than it used to, because maybe before it was once or twice a year on a corporate level, but now it feels like it has to be, Kimberly, to your point, at least maybe even monthly. With this evolving situation, it's got to be, every other week in some cases, depending on where you have offices opening or closing. I do want to push it a little bit and ask your opinion on, we are dealing with a fluid situation, but how does that change how you have to plan for the future? Because, we both for Extreme and Amgen, they're still multi-global businesses, right? So they're asking, what's the AOP plan? What are we going to be doing in the next 3 years? What are we going to do in the next 5 years? Take us through some of the things that you're thinking about while you're dealing with a real-time fluid situation, but also having to build for the future. I don't know if, Tamika, you want to start us off with that, if there are a couple of things you're thinking about.
I would probably need more time to talk about all the things that we're thinking about.
Podcast isn't long enough.
There you go. But I'll just hone in on a couple of things, especially from my lens, right? I think I want to speak more so from the lens of, really culture, right? And when we think about diversity, inclusion, to me, the lens of how we're making business decision has to have a lean on culture. Right. Because, when you think about corporate culture, community, and we know that, sometimes in a remote workforce, there is this isolation, right, that exists. Right. So how we are thinking, how do you create community when, maybe a large portion of your sales force or your workforce is remote, how do you create connection? I saw some recent data that suggests just over the past year, staff members say, hey, more frequent connection with my manager really yields higher engagement. And guess what frequent means? It's not once a week, it's 2 to 3 times a week, right? So, this leadership, shift in how you engage with staff members will be important. So, kind of my area of focus, because I'll let all the, kind of the workforce, diversity and suppliers, and, how we're thinking about the facilities and building the infrastructure to support. My lean has been toward how do we equip our leaders, right? We need to equip our leaders in a different way. And Kimberly mentioned to check in on needs of staff individually and their teams. Well-being, huge, right? When you think about, the percent, the depression and anxiety increasing by 30+% during the pandemic, right? So we have got to equip our leaders to again, also take this, increase the human-centric approach to how we drive our business and how we think about what we do. So we're doing a lot of work in that regard to help support our leaders in that, and just having them be more mindful about engagement.
So would it be safe to say then that you're thinking the planning is really coming into how do we build a new remote culture, and you're letting the logistics really be fluid as it comes?
You have to be. I think, we're still learning, right? To say that, hey, what this is even going to look like at the end of the year. How many of us as organizations have said, all right, maybe in July we'll come back. Okay, change our mind. It's going to be September. And even that's shaky, right? So I go back to that point of test, learn. We still have to do those fundamentals. We know, going back to just the increased pressures, probably in both of our industries, technology as well as healthcare, there is a premium on innovation right now. There's a premium for speed right now, right? So all that mixed with, people with higher anxiety, you got to meld both decision making with, staff member needs to make the right decisions as we navigate through this process. So that's how we're thinking about it. I don't think you can think about one side of the equation without really being mindful about the other in this moment.
That's interesting. In, I guess, my own personal experience, I joined Extreme at the beginning of the pandemic. So I've not met most of my coworkers.
It's true. I have no idea how tall he is.
6'3". But there's a statistic that says that 74% of employees want to work from home at least 2 days a week. And being able to go into an office and interface with people, and, you can build culture a little more easily, I guess you could say, by having people face to face. But Kimberly, tell me what it's like to try and build a culture, and what are the tools that are required to build culture in a remote workforce? I mean, that's a huge challenge.
Yeah. And I think that one of the fundamentals is communication and deciding on your communication strategy. One of the things I've been spending a lot of time thinking about is the next normal and the model. What is the model going to look like? I think it would behoove us to define that model pretty quickly. And from there, we can start to define communication, as Tamika said, culture, because no culture is going to stay the same through this pandemic and through this new work model. I think we need to in some cases, we need to stop thinking office and start thinking of collaboration space. That may not be, the office in the office park or that we're accustomed to. It may be this new collab space that we come together to collaborate.
That's really interesting.
So I really think that, the reliance on going back to the way things used to be is what we do not want to do. And it's really a disservice to our organizations to think that anything's going to be the same. We're clearly in a place we've never been before. And even the smartest of people and the experts can't really predict what's going to happen next. I think the culture piece, we're going to have to figure out as we go along, but absolutely, we have to communicate. And I think the other thing, Tim, that we have to do is start to define our next culture, the next normal. This is the culture, and start to build around that. I hope I answered that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I kind of went around the barn to get back there.
It's all good. I'm curious if you're seeing a settling of people getting comfortable with a fluid culture, if you will. Are people doing well with being in a circumstance where everything is in flux?
I think that as humans, we adapt. We're adapters. I think for the most part, many have adapted to this new work environment. But I don't think that we're kind of surviving now. But now that we know that there's this next normal, it's time to get back to thriving and defining what thriving is going to look like. So we're now coming out of this survival mode. Now our kids are going back to school. We're getting back in our vehicles for the first time in months. So now we're getting to the point where we need to start defining what's next and start looking at what thriving and growing looks like beyond COVID.
I think it's a really good point. And, I think it's safe to say that we're not going back to the way that it was, and things are going to forever change in the future. And I think with both of you on here, because you're both experts in diversity and inclusion, I would be remiss not asking, how do you feel that this is going to impact diversity? Because there are some people that say work remote actually increases diversity. Some people are saying it's impacting diversity in a negative way. That is a whole new space that we have to take a look at, and it's going to be challenged. And, to your point, Kimberly, we're going to have to figure out the new normal. So, Tamika, maybe if you can lead us off and let us know, what are some of the things you're thinking about is how do we continue to be inclusive in our culture and our work community?
Yeah, and I kind of look at that across how we talk about diversity and inclusion, right? So as I think about the D, right, I think this new environment and ability to now cast a wider net for diverse talent around the globe, to me, that's exciting, right? Where we don't have to now think about, are you willing to relocate to Thousand Oaks, California, right? Like, how do we tap into talent, which is a fabulous town, but not for everyone. But at the end of the day, how do you really cast a wide net and reach talent unlike you've been able to do before? So to me, great opportunity there. But then I also think about, how do we even go deeper in the talent pipeline? Think about now, that's a luxury for all of us. And we're going to be, all competing for all that diverse talent across the globe. So how do we even think differently about how we go earlier in the talent pipeline are some of the things that we're thinking about. So when I think about some of the recent work that McKinsey has done in looking at, we have 100 million workers across 8 countries that may need to switch occupations, right? Because there's been, labor demands down in some sectors and up in others. And fortunate for us on this call, technology, healthcare, STEM related jobs are on that labor demand high. So we need to figure out, okay, is there a way for us to even upskill and build digital infrastructure for some of that talent quicker? Which I know there are some great models out there of how people are doing that. So we're looking at, hey, we may not even wait till your 4-year degree. How do we start looking at talent earlier and begin a quicker upskill to bring talent across the globe where we need it? So that's just one piece of the equation on diversity. And then switching back to the culture, which will be important. Again, I think we need to do all those things we just talked about, because as you bring in talent, how do you connect them with a broader culture? And I think traditionally we've leaned on kind of old models of employee resource groups, which were all site-based. We got to think different about that, right? I think leaders will have a big, a role to play in building culture, as well as creating platforms for co-creation, connection, and just, hey, getting to know each other, right? So I think we need to be mindful about how we're doing that. But I'm excited about what this opportunity yields for us in terms of thinking about, casting a wider net and building more inclusive and diverse work cultures. So
Tamika, and I'll go to Kimberly afterwards. Do you feel that the technology is in place to support that kind of engagement?
I think even that is evolving. I think there are some tools we're leveraging today, but I think as we kind of start settling, I like what Kimberley said, the next normal, we're going to have to really, I think, continue to accelerate, the digital infrastructure to support some of those things. I think, we're doing some good jobs in terms of collaboration tools. Trust me, we're going to get stale on that real quick. So how do we start thinking about, look, give me some virtual reality and how I, communicate with people? Like, I think we need to start thinking, even 2 steps ahead of how do we keep it energetic and not stagnant for our staff members around this engagement and this co-collaboration in whatever environment we're working in. Because I think that really gets to the heart of how we thrive, right? How do we start building this new sense and sentiment with our respective workforces?
So, Kimberley, how do you feel about visiting me in virtual reality space? Is that the kind of technology we're looking for us to be able to build that culture? What are your thoughts on that?
Tim, I absolutely love it. And one of my to-dos is gamification platforms.
Oh, wow.
So we've done quite well with ERGs. And so even in this COVID space, we've raised up 6 new ERGs. And so we've started the ERGs with a model that was already fluid and was already virtual. And many of our employee resource group members have never met each other. And so coupled with that, we also have sites that previously had these gatherings that they're now having to do virtually. I think that as humans, we have reinvented some things, and that just organically, we were able to figure it out. I think organically it's gotten us to a certain place, but there's so much more that we now have to do. I would say that if we're not looking out 5 years now to look at this collaboration model, we're already behind. And so that's really where we are now, is starting to look out further to see beyond COVID, how are we going to collaborate in a more meaningful way and build those deeper relationships that Tamika alluded to. One thing I did want to point out, as it relates to diversity, I think the other thing we have to keep top of mind is inclusion, and ensuring that even as we're bringing in diverse talent, we need a way, in this virtual space to plug them into the organization, to plug them into the culture. And so we can't leave that piece out, because that's going to be critical. An employee that's not included is not engaged. And so they typically will not stay with the organization.
It's like, Kimberley, you're already in my mind. You're getting to what my next question is. I'm hearing you both say really exciting things about diversity, in the sense that we're looking at how can we include people more from different backgrounds and areas to ramp them up and upskill them faster and even before they finish their 4-year degree. And then also, borders don't matter anymore. As long as someone's willing to work in relatively the same time zone, we can recruit from anywhere. But Kimberley, to your point, how do you build that corporate culture? If you're traditionally based in Thousand Oaks, but then you hire someone who's based in, let's say, London, how do you bring that Thousand Oaks sort of vibe that Amgen has to that person who's working remotely in London? Tamika, maybe you can give us an example of a few things you guys are thinking about right now.
Yeah, and I think it's bringing a recognition, Carla, to, do we need to bring that Amgen Thousand Oaks vibe to London? No, right?
London's just fine.
London's fine, right? How do we really enhance how we connect, I think, is what we're focused on. And one of the ways that we've done it this year, because I think, you see so many organizations, they do this, hey, we're going to do a corporate training on unconscious bias this year. Yay. And it's a one and done. But one of the things that we've really honed in on is, what are those? We've really parsed out inclusive behaviors. Like, how do we equip staff members and leaders uniquely on what does good look like, right? So we have really developed this kind of ongoing corporate journey, right? We're going on this journey together and focusing on one behavior at a time. So that already now creates connection, because when you start hearing people talk about it, or we did this workshop on this, so we give all the tools, the language, the how. And it's really nice to hear leaders and how they're engaging with it. But it was very intentional for us as an organization to not just blow through what that looked like. Like, okay, do this in a year. No. This is an 18 to 24-month journey that we're all on. So that's a way that we're already trying to establish connectivity for the whole organization, honing in on what does it look like to understand each other and leverage the power of diversity. What does it mean to acknowledge our differences and understand that, hey, if you don't really kind of understand what my experience uniquely is, as an African-American woman, how can you fully appreciate potentially what I bring to this discussion and this equation? So we are really kind of equipping folks to take advantage of diversity and create that inclusive environment within their micro teams, remote, and most of us are remote. So we're going on that journey together to try to keep that connection. And going back to that communication piece, it's critical, right? So we've developed those platforms. We're leveraging one Altru, right? Where we want those authentic videos. We want to get them in. What are you thinking? Oh my God, I did this workshop and it was nerve wracking, right? When I was on this behavior, we want to amplify the voice of the staff experience. So we're doing a lot in that regard. And I can't wait to hear from Kimberley on her next things to do list on gamification, because I can't wait to share some best practices on that, because something that's top of mind for us for the future. So really excited about what she mentioned there and can't wait to hear more about it.
Kimberley, you have that face of, I have something to add.
You'll be the second to know, Tamika.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I do have something to add. So as Tamika was sharing, I did jot a couple things down. So a few things she said. One, inclusion has to be woven into the leadership. I believe wholeheartedly we have to model this thing. And so as our leaders model an inclusive culture, it will permeate into the organization. The other thing I would say is, as you said, Tamika, we don't, in some places, we really want the diversity in the room. We want your diverse thoughts and perspectives in the room. And so we have to decide and model that. I mean, that's the biggest thing I wanted to add. Decide and model. Really, it's that simple. And when there's no, when we don't have the clarity on what we're trying to do, everyone does what they think is the right thing to do. I think with culture, it's important that we also define what the culture is, that we know what it is. And if inclusion is not in your culture, it should be, because that's the way we're going to get it. We're going to walk it out in the org.
So as we move into the next normal, and we look at how we're including people, how we're empowering leaders to make sure that everybody is included, what do you look at from a technology perspective for somebody who's sitting in their home office, as I am, at a fair distance from each of the offices where my coworkers work? What are those key things that come to mind from a technological perspective that would enable a better experience? Is it better physical virtual presence? Is it better tools to be able to collaborate? What are the key things that you're hearing from people within your organizations, both Kimberley and Tamika, that you think would make the experience better?
I'll let Tamika take this one first. I would start by saying, I don't think Zoom is enough. And I think we've probably taken Zoom to its absolute boundary. But I don't think it's enough.
I think ergonomic support is what I need. No, that was the first thing we started as an organization. Hey, here's the technology, but how do we, give some physical well-being in the process, right? Wow. And yeah, we focused on, hey, here's a page, because again, there's liability, obviously, just like it would be in an office. But how do we make sure that we are equipping staff members with just an experience that is good for their physical well-being, let alone their mental well-being. So that was a big thing for us in those first 6 months of, hey, here's some chairs we've assessed, here's a ergonomic, friendly, keyboard, like what are those things that help staff members focus on that? And I was first to that landing page. And then secondly, I think, I agree. I feel like, we have some great technology out there, Miro for I mean, there's a lot in terms of cross collaboration tools, but I do think much like Zoom, it'll get stale, right? As I mentioned earlier. And how do we really think about, evolving technology in a way that even creates, how is technology even being creative with an inclusive lens? Right. I think that needs to be the question on kind of the creators of this new platform. And I think us as organizations need to help co-create of what does good look like? Like, how do we build technology that has the lens of inclusion and belonging? Right. So I think that's an opportunity of how we can think about what will serve our needs in the future. And I think a recognition of that life is happening, right? So, like don't expect cameras to be on, like be okay with that. Expect to hear kids screaming, right? And not, make that feel uncomfortable for, a parent that has that issue in the moment. So again, it's really empathetic and inclusively. It's always going back to our leaders, right? And modeling. How do you model empathy in this moment? And really addressing what staff needs is really something we got to continue to build, just kind of a muscle with our leaders on. And that's something that I think we all can continue to do in the short and near term.
That's fantastic. And as someone who frequently has his 1-year-old son appear in meetings, it's good that people have a good laugh and they say hello and then it's okay, right? It's not an interruption. It's part of life. So thank you both so much, Tamika, Kimberley. What a great conversation. Really appreciate your perspectives on where we're going and what the challenges are going forward.
Thank you, Tim.
Tim, there's so much to unpack there, but I think one of the things that stands out the most to me is that there's a huge opportunity for whomever figures out how we can take technology to the next level. I think the statement that really stuck with me, there were a couple, but one that really stands out was from Kimberley, where she said, I don't think Zoom is enough. We've taken Zoom to its absolute boundary. And I would have to say, I completely concur, having spent 14 hours of my life a day on Zoom right now. But yeah, it has taken to its boundary. So that makes me think, whomever can figure out, how do we take this to the next step? Is it VR, or how do we work more collaboratively beyond just mural or things or workplace or things like that? How do we take it to the next level? That's a huge opportunity.
It really, really is. And, there's a lot of focus in the discussion that we had with them about the leadership, right? And the leadership being able to enable this and to build that culture. And I think that from a leadership standpoint, as you say, those that figure the next step out will be the ones that really win. I think it's the leaders that are trying to sort that through and are looking for what does address the needs to be able to create culture and to be able to make sure that we can include everybody into that culture. And that's something that was really interesting that I found that Tamika said was, how do we build technology with a lens of inclusion? Right. So it's not just about building technology. It's about building technology that solves the problem that we're seeing, which is the ability to create culture and to make sure everybody is included in that culture.
Yeah. So, I think what we're saying here is that there are 2 points that really have to change. One is, and Tamika pointed this out, is that we have to invest in new leadership. So leadership, to you, as you were saying, is fundamentally changing. It's got to change because we have to lead in the infinite enterprise. We have to lead remotely. And then second of all, technology has to catch up to allow for better inclusion, better collaboration, and change as, we continue to have to work together remotely. It's like 1 and 2. And it seems like they're in the process of trying to figure out the leadership portion. We have to figure out the tech portion.
Right. And technology has in so many ways always been limited to technology for technology's sake and users adopting that. But now this is about how we work together and the desire and demand for employees and for customers and for patients, all the way through the infinite enterprise to be able to have that experience addressed for them. And as you say, those that figure this out are going to be the ones that are the leaders and will win. And I'm really excited about some of the things that Kimberley mentioned with VR and gamification of culture, right? A little bit of a tease there. I'm really excited to figure out what that means and who's going to be able to address that, because that sort of Zoom fatigue or video conferencing fatigue, people have sort of gotten used to it as a tool and they're using it because they have to, but they know that there's something better and that they know that they need some kind of technology to make this experience better. We decorate our home offices and we make that feel like part of our culture, but really we need to find a way to have that experience amongst all of us out here in the infinite enterprise.
Yeah. And I think that what was also interesting outside of that, leadership has to change and the technology has to change and we have to redefine culture. But basically what I liked is that both of their attitudes, Kimberley with gamification and Tamika saying, maybe we just have to change our company culture of full stop. They're both essentially saying we have to throw out the existing playbooks.
Right.
It's whatever worked before isn't going to work now. And they also made it abundantly clear that there is a new normal. There no more back and forth. Is it going to go back to the way that it is? We've answered that question. The two experts have answered the question. It's not going back to normal. Whole new playbook.
Yeah, that's why I liked Kimberley saying the next normal, right? Because this is constantly in flux and we have to address that. It is not something that we solve today and expect to continue, because that's the exact same problem we had with the, shall we say, previous culture, right? Is that it was stayed and stolid and it didn't change. And now we've been forced into a moment of change. So we have to keep looking at that next normal and look at those technologies that are going to enable that next normal, because as we're stuck in this, we're seeing how the technologies are not appropriate and not supporting what we need as we go forward.
Right. And, the next normal means our next generation of CEOs are going to be able to lead digitally. They're never going to have to rely on being in person with their teams. They will build that culture, communicate. Everything will be remote. And that's the new normal. That's going to be the next generation.
Yep. And such an opportunity for us to include so many different people who never had that opportunity before. So
exactly.
I'm really excited about where this can go, and whoever figures it out is absolutely going to be the winner.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited as well. And I can't wait to see what the Infinite Enterprise brings.
Join us on the next episode of Inflection Points, where we'll be talking with Marcus Burton, Director of Technology in the Office of the CTO at Extreme Networks. Every good theory needs to be challenged, and Marcus will help us consider the human impact of the next normal. We'll also drill down into two key questions about the infinite enterprise. Should we build it, and do we want to live in that world? If you'd like to find out more about the Office of the CTO at Extreme Networks, find us on LinkedIn and check out the Extreme blog at www.extremenetworks.com.